Hello, folks. Today we're going to talk about an interesting topic. Some of you may or may not be aware of this sort of model. That's why we're going to talk about it. So I was talking to somebody recently, somebody new in the startup space trying to get into defense, and I talked about the SOF-to-Service transition model. If you've done any work with SOCOM, probably heard about this. If you haven't done work with SOCOM, this is probably all new. But there's a lot of different facets and sort of features wrapped up in this whole thing. A lot of folks have heard about special operations. A lot of folks have interest in selling to special operations and SOCOM. You know, you've heard that SOCOM has its own budget. They have their own acquisition authority. They can do some of their own purchasing. But there's a lot that goes into that. And so I was talking to that person, kind of dawned on me that I thought everybody knew this, but clearly not. So I'm going to talk through a couple of different components of this sort of process, and I'll give a little bit of insight on how it may or may not work. Okay, so as usual, if you like the content, if you like the information, like it, share it, follow the podcast, share the slides or the blog, what have you. Just want to get this information out. It took me 15 plus years to glean and gather all this insight and information. So I want to push it out as far and as fast as possible. So first things first, the basics. If you are not familiar with the terms of art in this space, there are a couple of different things. There is National Special Operations Forces, so National SOF. There's Theater SOF, Theater Special Operations Forces, and then what we call General Purpose Forces. These aren't my words, okay? These are doctrinal terms. These are written down in official government documents, okay? You want to go look up SOCOM Directive 70-1, go for it, right? I am specifically not going to use particular names and particular units because I'm not sure where the security classification guide is now, but all of the words that I'm using in this conversation are completely unclassified. They are not controlled unclassified information. They are not classified information. This all came out of completely unclassified documents that are published by the Department of Defense. So that's my upfront disclaimer. If you want to know more about these things, you can put the keywords into Google and do your own search and your own research yourself. But I'm going to stay very cleanly on the unclassified side of the realm. So basics: National SOF, Theater SOF, General Purpose Forces. General Purpose Forces is big Army, big Navy, big Air Force, big Marine Corps. Theater SOF is your Green Berets, your Air Force JTACs and PJs, your Navy SEALs, your Marine Corps Raiders, right? These are the Theater Special Operations Forces that are allocated, as we talked about in the past, they are allocated to the Theater Special Operations Commands, the TSOCs, right? There is a Theater Special Operations Command for each one of the Geographic Combatant Commands, the GCCs. Okay, so CENTCOM has SOC-CENT for the Middle East. EUCOM has SOC-EUR for Europe. INDOPACOM has SOC-PAC for the PACOM AOR, right? And so the Theater Special Operations Forces, when they go to war, when they go do their things, they fall under the operational authorities of those Theater Special Operations Commands. So if Green Berets go over to Poland, they are under the authorities of SOC-EUR, which is the Theater Special Operations Command that provides special operations support to the combatant command, right? So SOF support to European command. Okay, so there's that whole hierarchy there. National SOF is different, right? National SOF, as it sounds, their command authority comes down the national chains. And you can look up how the national command authority works and how that command comes down from the president or the SecDef down to national SOF units. I'm not going to get into that. That's not germane to the conversation. What we are going to talk about is how there is a process, there is a beaten path, if you will, of transitioning capabilities from national SOF to theater SOF. It's actually referred to by SOCOM documents as N2T, National to Theater, Transition of Technology. And there's also SOF peculiar, so SOF specific to service common, right? The transition of capabilities from special operations to general purpose forces. This is another known and well beaten path that has been successful in the past. Okay. So this is what we're going to talk about. This is an approach to transitioning technology. If you're interested in selling to SOCOM, it's great. You should know about how this path works. Okay. So again, doctrinally, when theater SOF, this is that first step. When theater SOF identifies a capability that is used, right? It's acquired, it's being implemented by the National Mission Force. I'm not going to say who or what the National Mission Force is. This, again, is completely unclassified and came out of a SOCOM unclassified document, this verbatim. So, read these words. Theater SOF identifies a requirement for a National Mission Force capability. The Special Operations Acquisition Team is expected to execute a highly tailored and expedited acquisition process to exploit this opportunity, given the relatively low technology design and, in some cases, production risks. What does that mean in real-world terms? It means that National SOF has the capability of buying stuff. Typically, they can buy stuff at a lower technology readiness level than theater SOF. They are also going to buy fewer of them, right? Because there's just fewer National SOF folks. National SOF has a very particular mission. Again, I'm not going to talk about that. But if there's a capability that they need for their mission sets, right? If they identify that they need your capability for their mission sets, then they have the ability to more quickly buy those things and use them for their missions. If theater SOF subsequently identifies that they have a requirement, they have a need for those things that National SOF has been using, then theater SOF can then buy them much more quickly because National SOF has bought them, they've tested and evaluated them, they've used them in exercises, right? They've quote unquote bought down the risk, the technical, the performance, the integration risk at a smaller scale, so that theater SOF, the larger, 35,000 Green Berets, the tens of thousands of Navy SEALs, can then say, hey, well, you bought down all the risk, you did the early integration and validation. We need that too because we have a similar mission. We're going to go ahead and buy it. And so what it does is it allows the Special Operations Acquisition Technology and Logistics, SOF AT&L, down in Tampa, to say, hey, okay, Green Berets, you need this. National SOF, you've been using it, you validated all that stuff. Cool. We're gonna go ahead and buy that. We're gonna skip the line a little bit to go down the road. Similarly, right? And so those National SOF folks, they actually have R&D authorities. They have kind of a smallish budget. They can quote buy, try, and decide. Right? They might buy 5 different versions of a thing. They might buy the same thing from a couple of different companies, right? We're going to buy a radio from this company and a radio from this company and see which one works better. We're going to throw the bad one out and we're going to keep the good one. And that's going to be our new radio. They have the ability to do that. Okay. Whereas the theater SOF folks and the general purpose forces don't have the ability to move that quickly. They also have a lot of power in general terms over the dollars that are spent down in Tampa, and they have some pretty decent clout on the Hill. So if they need something and there isn't money for it, they have ways of getting that money. Okay, so the bottom line foot stomp there is if they want your thing, generally they can get your thing, which is great, right? If you're trying to break in, that's a great avenue for a lot of early stage things. SOF peculiar to service common. Okay, so in order for SOF to buy something, it has to be, quote, SOF peculiar. It has to be unique to special operations missions and environments. Okay, it can't be a general thing, right? Like special operations can't buy an M4 carbine rifle. right? They just can't. That's not within their purview. What they can buy is things to go on an M4 carbine for their particular missions. And so as capabilities mature in the theater special operations forces, right, as they become more ingrained, more integrated, more prolific, they can transition into service common equipment. What's a good example of that? Oakley sunglasses is a good example. Over-ear ear protection is a good example. Squad level radios is probably a good example, right? Back in the day, every member of a infantry squad did not have a radio. Now it's a little bit more common. Precision multicam camouflage went all the way through the process. It started out in National SOF, moved into Theater SOF, and now general purpose forces are wearing that camouflage. Took a long time, but it went all the way through. And so this is kind of the long process, right? This is starting from National, where they will buy something that is low TRL, moving into Theater SOF, where they want it to be higher TRL, they'll buy more of them. And then once that capability has become kind of ingrained across multiple services, it can become service common. And SOCOM, here's an important fact, SOCOM likes it when things go from being soft peculiar to service common, because then the services will buy it. Talk about that a little bit in a minute. Okay, so why does this all exist? Why are these different archipelagos, like the SOCOM, the tribal archipelago, the components, the secretariats with the E-ring archipelago, right, where the PEOs are, and then National SOF, which is even more tribal. Why does this exist? Well, the fact is, it comes down, as usual, to money. Money. There are major force programs, right? This is how money is allocated. You can see this. This is the money box, right? So you've got different quote colors of money, right? RDT&E, procurement, Milcon, purse, Milpers, O&M. We talked about that in the past. You've got those different types of appropriations. They are allocated to the different services: Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine Corps, etc. But the programs fall within those MFPs, those major force programs. So if you're doing RDT&E, that is an MFP 6 funding line. If you're providing capabilities for general purpose forces, if you're selling boots or sunglasses or uniforms or Humvee trucks, generally that's going to be MFP 2. That is general purpose force capabilities. Special operations, SOCOM specifically, has what they call MFP 11, right? Major Force Program 11. And those MFP 11 dollars can only be spent on things that are soft peculiar, soft P. They have to be unique to a special operations mission, or else SOCOM is not allowed to spend those dollars. Okay, let's give an example. The AC-130 Ghost Rider gunship. Okay, this is an AC-130. We've all seen this, right? The Spooky or the Ghost Rider, whatever. The AC-130J is the most recent version. It is fundamentally an AC-130, right? Or a C-130, a cargo aircraft. So what they do is the Air Force buys C-130s for the entire Air Force. Everyone who needs C-130s across the entire Air Force, to include Air Force Special Operations Command, everyone gets C-130s. The C-130 program office in the Air Force buys all the C-130s. SOCOM does not buy C-130s. They're not allowed to buy C-130s because a C-130 cargo aircraft is not unique to SOCOM. It is not a SOCOM unique requirement. They don't have a special need for C-130s. What they have a special need for is a targeting computer and a howitzer and a 20 millimeter gun and a fueling stab so they can do in-flight refueling. All those things are SOF unique, right? Those only have to be added to the aircraft for SOCOM missions, because only SOCOM uses C-130s to shoot things from the sky. So that AC-130, the soft peculiar modifications to the C-130 is what SOCOM is allowed to buy. And interestingly enough, if you look at the unit price, and I didn't get into the deep dive into the different components, all up an AC-130J costs about 190 million. The Air Force part of that is about 75 million for a C-130J. The other 115 million is paid for by SOCOM. So the MFP-11 portion of that aircraft is 115 million. The Air Force component is 75 million. Now, imagine if the Air Force decided, in their infinite wisdom, that they wanted to make AC-130s, right, those attack aircraft with the big guns hanging out the side. If they wanted to make those things common across the entire Air Force, they were going to start doing close air support across the entire Air Force using AC-130s, and they standardized that, and they made that a big Air Force program, SOCOM would no longer be able to buy and modify those planes. That would then become a service common capability, right? That would be a SOF-to-Service transition, because Air Force, big Air Force, would then have the requirement and then the responsibility of buying that entire plane and then providing it to SOCOM. Okay, that's the way that works. And you can think about this in terms of like M4 carbines. You can think about this in terms of helmets. You can think about this in during the height of the Iraq and Afghan wars, there was the mine-resistant armor-protected vehicles, the MRAPs, right? The Army would buy big MRAPs, and then SOCOM would bolt a whole bunch of stuff onto them so they would be relevant for their missions. That's the way that MFP2, MFP11 relationship works. And so when you look at national forces buying stuff, that's going to be MFP11 because it's unique. It's unique to their national missions. When SOCOM buys things, they're only buying those portions of things that are SOF unique. But if they can move those things all the way through the pipeline and into service common, then they no longer have to spend their money on it, right? And so that is a big Benny. If you can make that work for SOCOM, it's actually a net benefit for them because they can reserve their resources, their funding for other things. So how does this look? Step one, you go to the National SOF. I'm not going to talk about who they are. I'm not going to tell you how to find them. They're around. They go to innovation events. They go to Collider events. They're with different services. So you might look for folks who have USASOC for Army, USASOC on their badge and not much else. You might look for someone who has NSW for Naval Special Warfare on their badge and not much else. But otherwise, if they want to be seen, they'll be seen. If they don't want to be seen, they won't be seen. They are getting more involved in outreach efforts and engagement. So they are out there. They do go to things like Thunderstorm events and SOFWorks collaboration exercises. So they're around. The most sort of surefire way to find them and get connected to them, sorry to say, is know somebody who came from one of those elements or hire somebody who came from one of those elements. Fortunately, it's a pretty tight-knit community. So breaking in from the outside is not the easiest thing. It is what it is. But here's the thing. They will take relatively low technology readiness level capabilities, right? So TRL level 5 to 7-ish, they're kind of happy to prototype with. They're not going to buy a lot of them though, right? Even if they're doing buy, try, decide, there's just not that many bodies there. So they might buy tens or hundreds. They're not necessarily going to buy thousands. Okay, there's just not that much need, but that's okay if they're willing to put some money on buying your early stage product and put money on it so that you can raise the TRL and give you the insights and feedback from their tests and evaluations. That's a double benefit to you. Okay, so when you're trying to find early operational customers, they might be a great option. And you can do that for a while, right? They've got resources. They can buy your stuff with relatively quick procurement processes. And then from there, as you mature that capability, that product, you get it to a higher TRL level. SOCOM, or the SOCOM components, will be more interested in it, right? SOCOM components, AFSOC, USASOC, NSW, MARSOC, they are happy to buy lower TRL level things than general purpose forces. And again, they're going to buy more than National SOF, right? There's tens of thousands of Green Berets and Navy SEALs and Air Force PJs and Marine Corps Raiders. So they will take a slightly higher TRL thing. It doesn't necessarily have to be all the way through all the acquisition wickets. But again, they're not going to buy 100,000 units like a big Army or a big Air Force will. So again, you kind of take that to the next stage. You get their operational feedback. You sell a fair number of units to them. You can actually make a living off of selling to the theater SOF, right? To the big SOCOM, AT&L PEOs. A lot of folks do. And then from there, you can make the justification. You can go through all the multiple wickets to then sell your capability into the major services, right? You can do that SOF-to-Service transition. And there are examples of that transition process taking place and being successful. It is going to take a lot more effort. It's going to be a lot harder. There's a lot more test evaluation, requirements development, etc. But this is where you're selling tens to hundreds of thousands of units, right? You're selling 100,000 boots, not 10,000 boots. You're selling thousands of counter drone platforms, not tens or hundreds. So that's where your large sort of economies of scale and orders of magnitude start to come in, and you can really start making a serious dent. Now, a thing to know about SOCOM is there's this thing called SOF-SIDS, right? The Special Operations Capability Integration Development System, right? It's basically JSIDS, but cut down and used for Special Operations Forces. Usually, you have to get more than one component on board. So this is that middle part where you're trying to sell to SOCOM. You generally, if you want to get to sell to a big SOCOM program of record, you have to get more than one component, right? So you got to get like Naval Special Warfare, you got to get the Navy SEALs and the Green Berets on board to buy your thing, right? It could be a radio, it could be a new Benchmade knife, whatever. You typically have to get more than one of them to agree to your capability, right? That's kind of how the SOF-SIDS process works. I'm not going to go all the way down the road in SOF-SIDS, except if your thing is somewhat unique. There are 4 of the PEOs, the Program Executive Offices down in SOCOM, that are basically directly aligned with a component, right? Like PEO Fixed Wing is essentially aligned with AFSOC. So AFSOC A58, the folks who do the acquisition requirements development for AFSOC, more or less kind of direct and indicate what PEO Fixed Wing is going to buy. Same thing goes for PEO Maritime. Like there's really no other maritime forces in SOCOM. It's mostly just NSW. So Naval Special Warfare Command N8 in Coronado more or less kind of defines what PEO Maritime is going to buy, right? The dry dock submersibles, all those things, right? They're all going to be bought by PEO Maritime for NSWC. So the requirements folks in NSWC are the ones who kind of define what that is. Same thing goes for Rotary Wing. SIMO and TAPO in our SOAC, right? The folks who do requirements and test and evaluation under the Army Special Operations Aviation Command are the folks that essentially define the requirements for what PEO Rotary Wing buys. PEO SOF Warrior is kind of dictated by what National SOF wants. Digital applications and tactical information systems are a little bit different, right? So PEO SOF, SDA, Soft Digital Applications, is like ATAC and MCS COP and like, the visual common operating pictures, basically anything to do with software. Tactical information systems is all kinds of stuff now. It's like C4ISR systems all in one. So that's a little bit more agnostic, right? You got to get a little bit more of a coalition together. Like I was talking about before, to sell into SDA or TIS. But for the other ones, like you can generally focus on sort of one component to get in there. And so if you're looking at a national to theater transition, you can kind of work backwards into which component you need to talk to and which PEO that will transition to when it goes into theater SOF. Now, here's the big foot stomp. None of this special operations selling strategy stuff negates the overall go-to-market strategy, right? You have to make all of these buttons line up, right? You have to identify the theater, the mission, the threat, the user, the job role, the mission essential task list, and line that up with your capability, okay? And on top of that, in order to sell into SOF, you have to make a strong and defendable case that that theater, mission, threat, problem, user, and job role are SOF peculiar, right? That your capability applies to a SOF peculiar use case. If anybody, SOCOM, and SOCOM will do this litmus test because they would rather spend the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine Corps' money on a capability they get than spend their own money. So you're convincing SOCOM first, and then you're convincing all the other programmers and budgeteers. You have to convince them like, no, my new unicorn, my new thing is currently only relevant to your theater, your mission, your threat, your job titles for your users. You have to convince them of that. You have to make a solid case. And, it could be that in the future, this will be relevant to everybody. This could be a thing that is service common, hopefully, in a couple of years. But at the outset, to get that MFP 11 money in your pocket to buy your thing, you have to make the case that it is SOF peculiar and that it is unique to their operators, and ideally more than one kind, right? It is SOF peculiar for Navy SEALs and Green Berets and Rangers. And the more of those things you can kind of put together, right? Oh, if you can get Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marines to agree that your thing is applicable to their SOF unique need, then you can make a good way through the SOF-SIDS process. Okay, so this is a crash course, a down and dirty on the theater to national, national to general purpose forces transition model. It is relatively simple. It is not necessarily easy, but if you're trying to find product market fit and sell capabilities to military end users, national and theater SOF are somewhat faster, somewhat more risk accepting than general purpose forces. It is a smaller target to hit. It is a little bit easier of a threshold to cross. So as you're doing your go-to-market strategy, it is a strategy that might be worth taking a look at.